Welcome to Dr. Mensch, the radio show that takes a real, compassionate look at mental health from A to Z. Join child and adolescent psychiatrist Dr. Gil Lichtshein. Each week as we explore topics that matter: autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, OCD, schizophrenia, behavioral challenges, neurodevelopmental disorders, and more. No stigma, no judgment. Just honest conversations, new therapies, breakthrough treatments, and real solutions for real people. Mental health is not a weakness. It's a treatable medical condition, and help is available. Join the conversation now by calling the studio at 888-994-4995, Studio A. This is Dr. Mensch, where hope and healing begin.
Good morning. This is Dr. Gil Lichtshein. I'm saying morning because I'm doing the show today, Monday, at a little different time. It's about 11 a.m. on a beautiful, sunny, early spring day here in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm Dr. Gil Lichtshein, aka Dr. Mensch. I'm a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I have an office in Boca Raton at 7100 West Camino Real, Suite 404. And my phone number is 561-300-4052. This is a pretty, important week for people who celebrate Passover and Good Friday and Easter. Passover starts Wednesday night, and then I believe yesterday was Palm Sunday. I don't know exactly what that celebrates or what that is for, but my understanding is Friday is Good Friday and Sunday is Easter, so it's a big holiday for Jews and Catholics and Christians, although I think Orthodox Easter is a different time. So I guess those of the Latin Catholics and Protestant churches. So I want to wish everybody out there a happy Passover and a happy Easter. Today, I actually want to talk about my book, Dr. Mensch, A Prescription for Evil. It's I guess you would say a psychological thriller. It was written during COVID. This is going back almost 6 years ago. It's hard to believe how time has flied. And it's about 110, 120 pages, so it's not some, big, huge, novel that was written. It's more of an action-packed psychological thriller that my friend David Iacovetti wrote, but the ideas and the background of it came from myself and my best friend Adam DeLuca. And how that came about is Adam, I call him like my brother from another mother, is probably my closest friend, or one of my closest friend, certainly in the top 2 or 3, but and he's originally from Long Island, New York, but as a teenager, moved to Florida, lived in Boca, now lives in the Tampa area. But his family, really his father's family, but I guess you could determine from his last name DeLuca, he's Italian, but he's like third generation Italian. His father was born here. I believe his father's father was born here. It was his paternal great grandfather that was born in Italy. So he's like a third generation Italian, but he doesn't speak a word of Italian. But his father grew up in East New York, which is then a kind of a tough, well, even now, a tough neighborhood in Brooklyn. And his father, Frank, who's now, doing my math, 85 or 86, so when he's about his mid-80s, grew up and was very close and kind of growing up friends with Henry Hill. And Henry Hill, whose claim to fame was, he's a character that was played by Ray Liotta in the Martin Scorsese blockbuster film Goodfellas that came out in 1990, that I mean, names were altered, but basically Ray Liotta was played Henry Hill, and it was a movie about Henry Hill, how he grew up and kind of joined this kind of crime family in East New York called the Vario crime family, or the Vario crew. They were a branch of the Lucchese family, one of the 5, families in the mafia. And how that came to be was back in the early days of the American mafia, actually, people think like, oh, the mafia was heavily Italian. In fact, in the early days, the killers in the mafia were actually Jews. But with the ascension of, and there are movies about, like, there was a movie that came out, I believe it was even before Goodfellas. It was called Mobsters. It was Patrick Dempsey. Who else was in it? Richard Grieco. I'm trying to remember who else, but it was a Hollywood, obviously take on the story of the ascension of Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Benjamin / Bugsy Siegel. Focusing on Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky, those two were kind of like the responsible for the growth of the American mafia in the 20s and 30s. And I kind of call, Lucky Luciano is the one who came up with the idea of this kind of 5 families and having like a grand council of the mafia, way of kind of organizing it. And so it was through Lucky Luciano that they, this kind of 5 different families: the Gambino, the Lucchese, the Colombo, and there's always been some infighting and inter-family wars, but Lucky Luciano is kind of like the, he and Lansky are kind of like the founding fathers of the mafia. And in turn, the Italians kind of became like the enforcers, and I don't want to stereotype, but through Meyer Lansky, the Jews kind of became like the money men. Maybe that's stereotyping, but Meyer Lansky was the brains behind turning Havana into a mafia haven before Castro took over. And Meyer Lansky never served a day in jail until his very death, I believe in 1983. He died actually in Miami Beach. He died a very wealthy man. The guy was brilliant. But going back to how it ties into my book is that my best friend Adam's father grew up with Henry Hill, and then Henry Hill later became an associate. He wasn't Italian, so he couldn't actually be a made man, because in order to be a made man in a mafia, you have to be fully Italian. And with Henry Hill being Irish, he was more of like an associate of the Vario family, and then within the bigger system, the Lucchese crime family. And through Frank's, being childhood friend of Henry Hill, Frank kind of got to know and befriended and become, I'm not going to say full out crime associates, but kind of network with other members of the Vario family. And in the movie Goodfellas, Henry Hill was played by Ray Liotta. Jimmy Conway, named Jimmy Conway, aka his real name was Jimmy Burke, was played by Robert De Niro. And the only character that really had the real name used was played by Joe Pesci, Tommy DeSimone. So Jimmy Burke was a Irishman, kind of a psychopathic killer. He was behind the Lufthansa heist back in 1978 at JFK Airport, and at that time was like the largest heist in like history. Tommy DeSimone was even more of a psychopathic killer, and unfortunately, he was killed because he killed a fellow mobster named Billy Batts, who I believe was of the Gambino family, and unfortunately, DeSimone didn't get proper permission to kill him, and so kind of in the mob family, an eye for an eye, Tommy got taken out. But Adam would tell me all these stories about his father's dealings. Like his father bought Jimmy Burke's bar/club that had actually been mentioned in the movie Goodfellas, and Adam would tell me all these stories about his father's dealings with Jimmy Burke, with Henry Hill, even with the character played by Paul Sorvino. Paulie, I believe in the movie was Paulie Colombo, but that was really Paul Vario, Uncle Paulie. He was the head of the Vario crime family. He was later imprisoned and died in prison in the late 80s. I mean, everybody from the Vario family that played in the movie are dead. Jimmy Burke died in prison. He was involved in a Boston point shaving scandal. Henry Hill died, I believe, within the last 10 years or 5-10 years. He was in the witness protection program because he ratted out on the family. Tommy DeSimone was murdered. And even Paulie's brother Tootie also is dead. So, but over the years, going up to New York with Adam, I've had a chance to meet with some of the relatives of the Vario family. I got to meet Uncle Peter. His name was Jocko. He was this kind of like mild-mannered looking guy who was unassuming. He was short, like 5'6", 5'7", very thin. He was Paulie's brother, Salvatore's son. So he was the nephew of Paul Vario. But you would meet this guy. He would have these kind of geeky-looking glasses. And for anything, the first time I met him, I thought the guy was Jewish. I mean, he talked with this like thick Brooklyn accent, and he would when I was introduced to him, he started talking to me in Yiddish because he's like, "Hey, you're a Jew, you know Yiddish." So and I'm like, this guy Jocko was like pure Sicilian, born in Sicily, and got to learn that this guy had dozens of people murdered. This guy was a vicious killer, but you would never know it. And then I got to meet kind of grandsons of Uncle Paulie, and then got to meet the adopted son of Tootie. Tootie's real name was Vito. So Tootie had a son, Vito Jr., and he adopted a son named Dominic. So I got a chance to meet Dominic. And again, the interesting about these, none of these, other than Jocko, the grandsons weren't made because there was like three grandsons, Tommy, Peter, and John. They weren't made because their father, Rugsy, married a Polish woman, so none of them were made. Jocko was the only made man. On that note, I will take a brief commercial, and I'll come back and further discuss my book.
What happens when the mind of a healer crosses over into the darkness of the human soul? From authors David Icovetti, Dr. Gil Lichtshein, and Yolanda DeLuca comes a chilling psychological thriller, Dr. Mensch, A Prescription for Evil. This gripping novel follows a respected Boca Raton psychiatrist who secretly descends into madness, transforming into a modern-day king of the underworld. Inspired by true events and Dr. Gil's childhood connection to a mob family, this story blurs the line between sanity and evil, genius and destruction. Unforgettable, disturbing, impossible to put down. Get your copy today on Amazon.com. Dr. Mensch, A Prescription for Evil, a 2020 psychological crime thriller. You're listening to Dr. Mensch with child and adolescent psychiatrist Dr. Gil Lichtshein. For a copy of his powerful new book, Dr. Mensch's Prescription for Evil, visit Amazon.com. For more information or to schedule a consultation, contact Dr. Gil directly at 561-300-4052 or visit docgil.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Hello there, Dr. Gil Lichtshein, aka Dr. Mensch, back, continuing to talk about a little bit about my book and kind of like the background to why Adam and I decided to pursue this. And again, getting to know Adam's extended family through his father's side. These were in essence, all these relatives of his, or call them cousins, were all psychopaths. I mean, I'd sit around and I'd listen to some of their stories of how Tommy would be in this kind of crane business and talk about how he would embezzle money, and his other brother was in the contracting business and how they would overcharge on this and over that, and they were just laughing at it. And I just found it hilarious. They talk about these crimes that are committing nothing. But one thing that I found very interesting is they were very family oriented. Family was a big thing for them, that it meant everything. One of the brothers, John, had a kid who's on an autism spectrum, but John was a devoted father. He had a dog that he just worshipped. That was almost like his son. So it's very interesting, on the one hand, listening to these stories about them committing murder and robbery and this and that and extortion and racketeering, and on the other hand, how they talk about how family is really the most important thing. And so, this is going back, we're talking, 15 years, 20 years. So then, Adam and I kind of made up these stories in my head, and I kind of was wondering hey, what would it be like to be a mobster, or the kind of the glamour. Now I know in today's world, the mob, at least the Italian mob in the United States, has kind of lost its glamour. Maybe not so much still in Sicily or in Naples. But nowadays, in terms of the mob, it's the drug cartels, Colombia, Mexico, Russian mob, Albanian mob. The Italian mob is kind of gone by the wayside, so to speak. But back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was John Gotti, Dapper Don, Carlo Gambino. I mean, you name it. This that was the heyday of the mob. So, and then Goodfellas, and you watch these mob movies like The Irishman or Goodfellas, or I'm trying to think of what other mob movies there have been. The Godfather, the trilogy of The Godfather. I mean, kind of talks about the nostalgia of the mob. So, kind of got Adam and I thinking about writing, something about, the mob, but pertaining to how, Adam's, distant family kind of had a mob history, and kind of tying our friendship in there, and so kind of came up with the idea with this, psychiatrist in Boca Raton. And it's kind of not only coincidence that Adam knew a psychiatrist in Boca Raton, namely me, and we kind of, played on this character who, would be treating all these patients and then kind of went dark, kind of sinister, cruel, and we thought of the word Dr. Mensch. Mensch is a Yiddish word that kind of means a nice person, like a good down to earth human being who's a nice guy, a kind heart, goes out of his way to help people. And so it's kind of like an oxymoron or a play on words where, okay, Dr. Mensch, a prescription for evil, and this guy, Dr. Mensch, you would think a nice guy, is probably the biggest, MF you could think of. Who would stop at, no holds barred, no rules apply to him. He'll do anything. He'll, at some point, I think in the book, he's sleeping with patients. He's doing drugs. He's wanting to have people killed, and so it's a book about how this, kind of well-to-do, mild-mannered, physician, has a decent reputation, kind of spirals into madness and darkness. And then the picture on the cover, having this kind of mask. So this mask also kind of playing on this idea of, Dr. Mensch kind of going over, off the rails, going postal. So that kind of mask with that beak. So those were masks worn by physicians during the time of the Black Death or bubonic plague that affected most of the inhabited world. There was many outbreaks, but the initial big one was in the mid 14th century that plagued most of central, western, central, eastern Europe, and killed like 50% of the world's population. So there'd be reports of towns like bearing like almost the entire villages, but people dying. This actually also played a role in or led to mass migration of Jews from what was then called the Holy Roman Empire, but what would now be considered Germany and northern Italy, and pushed kind of Jews into Eastern Europe, and actually there was a mass migration of Jews into what is now Poland, because Jews didn't seem to be as affected by the Black Death, and so there was a lot of thought, Jews poisoned the wells and were killing Catholics, and I even documented of the Pope issuing papal bulls saying this is all nonsense. But doctors would wear these kind of like scary masks as they try to heal people from this pestilence that they really didn't know what it was. Now we know it's bubonic plague, and even though it still affects people, we're not having millions and millions of people dying with bubonic plague anymore because we have antibiotics. But back in 1350, there were no antibiotics. Modern medicine has evolved significantly in 600 in nearly 700 years. So that's kind of like where the cover came from. Over course of like about 5 years or so, Adam and I kind of had all these like ideas, in our head, and I'm trying to remember how we met Dave. I had Dave Iacovetti on the show a few months ago, but he has also a tie to the mafia. His father, Dave Iacovetti Sr., was a capo or a consigliere for the Gambino family in South Florida, and Dave had written a book about his kind of experience as being the son of Dave Iacovetti Sr., and was also involved in a movie project with Ciro DiPaggio, who's another ex-mob guy who actually did time in prison for not being a rat. And so we approached Dave with this concept, and we didn't really have anything, we didn't have like a script. So we just came up with like bullet points. Like I remember meeting with him, and like on legal pad, we just kind of had bullet points, and he kind of synthesized it, and over several months kind of wrote out kind of the text of what Dr. Mensch is. And I remember when I first got a copy of the book, it was, to me, and maybe I'm biased, but it was very gripping and thrilling. And I remember just reading it and just like in an hour and a half, and it was done. It was a very fast read, but like just total like nonstop action, kind of like a psychological mob thriller. And we were hoping that maybe at some point, maybe we could have made it into some sort of Netflix movie or series, or who knows. But for a while, we had connected with another ex-mobster, Larry Mazza, who's also done some. He lives up in, I believe, in the Melbourne area, and he's done some shows about mob. He used to be the enforcer for Larry Scarpa, who was also known as the Grim Reaper. and Mazza has done some time in prison, and he actually had a brief scene in the movie The Irishman where he was one of the two hitmen that killed Albert Anastasia. But we're still hopeful that something might come out of it. But it was something that Adam and I were very happy with, and even though that we haven't made millions off this book, it's available on Amazon, and it's it's an interesting, like I said, psychological thriller, kind of giving some ideas of like mob life and kind of what mob life is like. And like I said, yeah, it is, the life of criminals, I mean, for lack of a better word, who engage in, racketeering, murder, robbery. They don't really go into drugs, but it's really more robbery, racketeering, money laundering, kind of, white collar type of crime. But family is also, a key component, and family is very important in the mob. Biological family, like your kids and your spouse, but also the mob family is like your brothers. So I'm hoping, a little bit of talking about the book will get people interested to go to Amazon and purchase Dr. Mensch, A Prescription for Evil. I believe it's like $19.99. It's not that expensive, and it's a quick read, but it's a thrilling a read. So I hope people are interested enough to go and purchase the book. And on that note, this is Dr. Gil Lichtshein, a.k.a. Dr. Mensch. I want to wish everybody a happy Monday and a happy Passover and a happy Easter to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for Dr. Mensch with Dr. Gil Lichtshein, helping you navigate the world of mental health with clarity and care. If you or someone you love needs support, you're not alone. Treatment works and recovery is possible. To schedule a consultation or discuss non-medication therapies, personalized treatment plans, or psychiatric care, contact Dr. Gil directly at 561-300-4052 or visit docgil.com. You can catch us each week on South Florida Oldies Radio and streaming across all social platforms. Until next time.